The morning she walked into my bedroom and told me the color had to go, I understood that something had shifted a long time before I was willing to name it. I had painted that room myself 11 years ago. Sage green, the kind that holds light differently depending on the hour. My husband Gerald had stood on the ladder while I directed him, and we laughed so hard the rollers slipped and left a streak along the ceiling neither of us ever fixed. Gerald passed 4 years later. That streak stayed. I kept it on purpose. My daughter-in-law Brenda stood in the doorway with her arms folded and looked at my walls the way people look at something they have already decided to change. She said the green was dated. She said it clashed with the new hallway curtains she had ordered without asking. She said, and I remember this clearly because the words arranged themselves in my chest like stones, that if we were all going to share this space comfortably, everyone needed to be willing to adjust. I looked at the streak on the ceiling. I thought about Gerald on that ladder, laughing. Then I said I would think about it, which was the kind of answer I had trained myself to give over the 3 years since my son, Marcus, and Brenda had moved in. Temporary, he had said, just until the new job settles and we get our footing. I had believed him because he was my son, and because believing him felt like love, and because I did not yet understand how long temporary could stretch when no one is keeping count. I did not paint over the walls. I did something else entirely, but I am getting ahead of myself. My name is Dorothy. I am 64 years old. I spent 31 years as a loan officer at a community bank in San Antonio, Texas. I reviewed financial documents the way some people read novels, for the story underneath the numbers, for what was being hidden between the lines. I retired 2 years before Marcus and Brenda arrived, and in the quiet of retirement I had grown softer in ways I did not notice until the softness was being used against me. Brenda was not a cruel woman in the way that word is usually understood. She did not shout. She was precise and architectural in the way she expanded, the way water finds every crack. First, it was the kitchen pantry reorganized without mention. Then my gardening tools moved to the back of the garage to make room for her exercise equipment. Then my Sunday television programs replaced by streaming services she preferred, the remote always just out of my reach. Small things, reasonable things, taken alone. Together they told a story I kept refusing to read. Marcus noticed none of it, or chose not to. My son is a gentle man who has always found conflict uncomfortable, which I once mistook for sensitivity and later understood was something closer to avoidance. He smiled when Brenda spoke and went quiet when I did. He had learned early in their marriage that keeping both women calm was easier than choosing between them, and so he chose neither, which meant he had quietly chosen her. I want to be honest about my own part in this. The therapist my friend Carol had been nudging me toward for 2 years would call it enabling, but I think the simpler word is fear. I was afraid of losing my son, afraid that putting my foot down would cost me Sunday dinners and birthday calls, and the particular sound of his voice on the phone when something good had happened at work. I had already lost Gerald. The thought of losing Marcus, too, felt like more than my chest could hold. And so I adjusted. I moved my reading chair from the sunroom because Brenda wanted a yoga space. I stopped cooking Sunday dinners because she preferred meal prepping on her own schedule. I ate breakfast at 6:30 in the morning to have the kitchen to myself before her day began. I had become a tenant in my own home, paying all the rent and following all the rules that someone else had written. The morning of the walls, something in me did not move. It simply stopped. I did not cry. I did not argue. I waited until Brenda left for her fitness class, and then I called Carol. Carol has been my closest friend since our children were in grade school together. She is the kind of woman who tells you the truth without enjoying it, which is the only kind worth having. When I told her what had happened, there was a pause on her end, the specific pause of someone who has been waiting a long time to say something. She said, "Dorothy, I have been watching this for 3 years. What are you going to do about it?" I told her I did not know yet. She said, "You know exactly what you are going to do. You are just working up to admitting it." She was right. I had known since the pantry, possibly since before. I packed a small bag while the house was quiet. Not dramatically, not in a hurry. I folded 2 blouses, packed my medications, the folder I kept in the back of my closet with the property documents, and the small framed photo of Gerald and me at Galveston the summer before he got sick. I set the bag by the door and sat back down in my reading chair, the one in the bedroom now because the sunroom was full of yoga equipment, and I let myself look at the streak on the ceiling one more time. Then I picked up my bag and left. Carol's house was 20 minutes away and smelled like coffee and lavender. She did not ask me a single dramatic question. She simply set a mug in front of me, sat down across the table, and said, "All right, let's think clearly." That is what I needed. Not sympathy, clarity. I opened the folder. The house was mine. It had been mine since Gerald and I bought it in 1998, and it had stayed mine through his passing, through my son's wedding, through 3 years of slow and quiet takeover. Marcus was not on the deed. He had never asked to be added, which I had once taken as consideration and now understood was because Brenda had other plans for what belonged to her. Carol refilled my coffee. "You know someone," she said. I knew several people. 31 years in banking gives you a particular kind of address book. I called James Whitfield at 8:45 the next morning. James had handled property and estate matters in San Antonio for over 2 decades. We had referred clients to each other for years. When I explained the situation, no drama, just facts, he listened without interruption. Then he asked, "Is your name still the sole name on that deed?" "Sole owner," I said. He exhaled slowly. "Then you are in a stronger position than you realize. Legally, the process is straightforward. What you need to decide is how you want to proceed." I told him I wanted to proceed correctly, documented, clean. He said he would prepare a formal notice of termination of occupancy, 90 days, given the duration of stay. He would also advise sending written notice that any ongoing shared utilities or accounts in my name would be closing. "Anything else?" he asked. There was one more thing, but I was not ready to say it yet. Not until I had looked at certain numbers. That afternoon, Carol drove me to the bank. Not my community bank, my personal bank, where my savings had sat untouched since retirement. I also logged into the account I had made the mistake of linking Marcus to, a supplementary account I had opened when he first moved in, because he had said the transition period was tight, and I had said, of course, we can make this easier. I had not looked at that account in 7 months. I had trusted. That is the word for it. I had trusted. The withdrawals told a story I recognized from my years behind the loan desk. Small amounts first, easy to overlook. Then larger ones, spaced carefully, never so large they would alarm. Subscriptions to services I had never heard of. Transfers to a business account I did not recognize. A business account, as it turned out, registered in Brenda's name. I sat in Carol's passenger seat in the bank parking lot and looked at the numbers until they stopped being a surprise and became simply information. 31 years of reading documents had taught me that the first emotion is always personal. The second is always practical. I let myself have 1 full minute of the first, and then I moved to the second. I called James back. "There is a supplementary account?" I told him. "I need to document the transaction history before I close it. And I will need advice on whether this constitutes misuse of access." His tone changed, careful and precise. "Send me the statements," he said. "All of them." I did. The notice was served on a Tuesday. I was not there. I was sitting in a corner booth at the diner 2 blocks from Carol's house, eating eggs and reading the newspaper in the unhurried way I had not allowed myself in 3 years. My phone buzzed at 9:41. Marcus. I let it ring. It buzzed again. Then again. Then a text. Just 3 words, in all capital letters. The kind of typing that happens when someone is standing in a room that has suddenly stopped making sense. Mom, what is this? I finished my eggs. I drank my coffee. Then I called him back. He answered before the first ring completed. His voice was high and fractured in a way I had not heard since he was a boy and something had frightened him. Mom, there is a man here with papers. He says we have to leave. He says 90 days. Mom, what is happening? I heard Brenda in the background, her voice low and controlled, which told me she was more afraid than Marcus because she already understood what the papers meant. Marcus, I said, listen to me. Read the papers carefully. The man is just doing his job. This is between us, not him. He said, you cannot do this. We live here. This is our home. It is my home, I said. I allowed you to stay in it. That is not the same thing. Silence. The kind that means a door just closed inside someone. Then Brenda's voice came through, closer to the phone. She had taken it from Marcus. She said my name with the precision of someone who had been preparing a speech. She said that what I was doing was cruel, that I was punishing them for nothing. That family does not operate with legal documents and eviction notices. I said, family also does not open business accounts with someone else's money without asking. Another silence. This one had a different quality. How did you? She started. Documents, I said. I worked in a bank for 31 years, Brenda. I know where to look. I always knew where to look. I simply chose not to. She said nothing. I said, the account will be closed by end of day. The utilities in my name will transfer out over the next 30 days. You have 90 days from the date on that paper. I suggest you use them well. She hung up. A minute later, Marcus called back, his voice now somewhere between anger and collapse. He said I was being irrational. He said I was letting a misunderstanding destroy his family. He said Brenda had been planning to pay everything back and I just needed to trust the process. I sat with that phrase for a moment. Trust the process. I had heard it at that loan desk more times than I could count, always from people who needed more time, always from people who had already used more time than they should have. I said, Marcus, I love you. And because I love you, I am going to tell you one true thing. You have been living in a house you do not own, supported by money that was not yours, while a business was being built in your wife's name with funds that came from my account. I do not know how much of this you understood, but you are going to need to find out. And you are going to need to decide who you are apart from the story she built. He said that was not fair. I said fairness was a different conversation for a different day. I closed the supplementary account that afternoon. The calls continued for 3 days, some from Marcus, some from Brenda, one from a number I did not recognize that I let go to voicemail and later identified as Brenda's mother, who had opinions she delivered with the confidence of someone who did not know all the facts. I did not return any of them. Carol said I was handling it with more composure than she expected. I told her I was not composed. I was tired. On the 4th day, James called. He told me he had reviewed the account statements. The total withdrawn, without direct authorization, over 14 months was not small. It was not catastrophic, but it was not small. He said I had options. I could pursue civil recovery. I could also report it to the police, which would begin a different process entirely. I asked him what he recommended given the circumstances. He was quiet for a moment. He said, "What is your goal here, Dorothy?" I thought about it honestly. My goal was not to send Brenda to prison. My goal was not revenge, though I would be dishonest if I said the satisfaction of those 90-day papers had not settled something in me. My goal was simpler and harder to name. I wanted to stop being erased. I wanted my life to have an outline again. Tell me the recovery option, I said. We drew up a demand letter. Civil, precise, documented. The kind of paper that does not shout, but cannot be ignored. 2 weeks after the notice was served, Marcus showed up at Carol's door alone. He had texted first, which was new. He asked if he could see me. I said yes. Carol made herself scarce in the garden. He sat across from me at her kitchen table, and he looked like someone who had not slept, in the particular way that comes from thinking rather than worry. There is a difference. Worry keeps you spinning. Thinking keeps you still and awake. He said, I did not know about the account. I looked at him. I had spent a lot of years looking at his face and learning its moods the way you learn a language until it becomes instinct. He was telling the truth. Or enough of it, I said. But you knew something was wrong. He looked at the table. After a moment, he nodded once, small and careful, like it cost him something to move. I said, I know. I knew things were wrong too, and I did not say them. We both have to live with the time we wasted being quiet. He asked if I was going to sell the house. I had been thinking about it. I had been thinking about a smaller place, a condo on the north side of the city, 2 bedrooms, a balcony that faced east for the morning light, no yard large enough to require help I could not control, a place that had only ever been mine. I told him I had not decided yet. He said, whatever you decide, I understand. Those 4 words landed differently than I expected. Not a negotiation, not a preamble, just 4 words that meant he was finally standing in the room as himself. I said, are you going to be all right? He said he did not know. He said he had realized he had been managing 2 people's unhappiness for a long time and had confused that with being a husband. He said some things about Brenda that I will not repeat because they were private and because that part of his life was his to sort through. But he said them to me, which was new, and I let him. Before he left, I asked him one question. Did you know, when you moved in, that it was not going to be temporary? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I think I hoped it would be. I nodded. That I believed completely. I did not forgive everything in that conversation. Forgiveness is not a single moment. It is a direction you keep choosing, imperfectly, over a long time. But something between us shifted back to a place that felt real, the way a room feels different once you have opened a window that has been painted shut for years. The 90 days moved with the specific rhythm of consequence. Brenda arranged a moving truck for day 62. I know this because James's associate drove past the house that morning and sent me a brief message with the details. I did not go over. I had learned from the original story, the one inside my own chest, that watching someone pack is not closure. It is just attendance. What I did instead was call my painter. Her name was Rosa, and she had repainted my kitchen 4 years before. She remembered the house. When I told her I needed every room freshened, she came on a Thursday morning and walked through each space with a practiced eye. She paused in the master bedroom and looked at the streak on the ceiling. That one staying? She asked. Yes, I said. That one stays. She smiled, like she understood. And she might have. I chose the colors slowly. 1 room at a time. Sage green again for the bedroom. A shade deeper than before. Warm ivory for the living room, to replace the gray Brenda had chosen during what I now thought of as the occupation. Soft gold for the kitchen, because Gerald had always said the kitchen should feel like early afternoon. When the painting was done and Rosa's crew had gone, I walked through the house in the quiet way you walk through a space that has come back to itself. No one else's fragrance in the bathroom. No footsteps rehearsed to avoid waking someone's mood. The refrigerator organized the way I preferred. The television remote on the arm of my chair. I made myself a cup of tea and took it to the backyard and sat in the garden chair that had been returned to its original place against the fence where the roses grew. The evening was warm and still. The city hummed at a distance. A bird somewhere in the neighbor's oak moved in the branches. I had not sat there in almost 3 years. 2 weeks after the house was restored to itself, I hosted a small dinner. Carol came, and two women from my old book club who had been wanting to visit for longer than I had admitted, and a neighbor from down the street named Frances, who was 72 and recently widowed, and navigating that particular quiet with the careful movements of someone learning new geography. We ate at the dining room table, which had not been used for a real dinner since Marcus and Brenda moved in, when it had become their workspace, covered in her planning boards and his unopened mail. After dinner, Frances mentioned something quietly. She said her son kept suggesting she add him to her checking account, just to help manage things, just to make it easier. She said she had been considering it. I did not lecture. That is not my way, and it was not the moment for it. But I opened a drawer and took out a single sheet of paper and wrote down 3 names. James Whitfield, an estate attorney, a financial advisor I trusted, a nonprofit that helped older women understand their property rights. I said, "These are people who answer questions without judgment. Whatever you decide, go into it knowing your options." She folded the paper and put it in her pocket. She did not say much else about it, but when she left, she hugged me the way people do when something has quietly helped them. Carol stayed after the others left and helped me carry dishes to the kitchen. She handed me a glass and said, without looking up, "You seem different." I said I felt different. She said, "You were always this person. You just had too much noise in the house to hear yourself." I thought about that for a while after she left, standing in the kitchen, the one with the gold walls, and the reorganized pantry, and the coffee maker on the left side of the counter, where it had always lived before it was moved for reasons I no longer remembered. 31 years of working with numbers had taught me that people reveal themselves through what they believe cannot be traced. They spend without watching. They sign without reading. They take because something in them has decided that available is the same as offered. I had seen it in borrowers. I had seen it in contracts. I had failed to see it in my own home because love makes you look away from the thing you are not ready to know. But the documents do not look away. The deed does not change based on who raises their voice. The numbers on a statement do not rearrange themselves out of loyalty to a story someone else is telling. I had known this for 31 years and forgotten it for 3. What surprised me was not that I had forgotten. What surprised me was how completely I came back to myself once the noise stopped. Marcus called on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after Brenda left. He said things between them were complicated, which I understood to mean they were ending, though that was his story to tell in his own time. He said he had picked up extra work. He said he was paying his own utilities for the first time in 4 years, and that the amount had surprised him. I said, "Welcome to adulthood, sweetheart." He laughed, a real one, the slightly embarrassed kind that means something landed. He asked if he could come to dinner sometime. I said yes. As a guest. With notice, he said, "I understand." He came 2 Saturdays later. He brought flowers, which he had not done since he was a teenager trying to get out of something. He sat at the dining room table and ate the meal I cooked and talked to me the way he used to before Brenda became the translator between us. Not about big things. Not about all the things that needed processing. Just about his week, his thoughts, a book he had started, a memory of Gerald that had come up on a drive and made him pull over. It was ordinary. It was enough. That night, after he left, I stood in the family room and looked at the space around me. The sage walls visible through the bedroom doorway. The remote on the arm of my chair. The framed photo of Gerald and me at Galveston on the bookshelf, where it had always lived, until someone moved it to make room for a speaker system, and I had quietly placed it in a drawer and told myself it was fine. It was just a photo. I could manage. It was back on the shelf now. Slightly crooked in the way Gerald always left things crooked because he said perfection was exhausting. I looked at it for a long time. Then I turned off the lamp, not because someone told me the hour was late, not to avoid a reaction, not out of the careful, practiced smallness I had mastered over 3 years of living like a guest in my own story. I turned it off because I was ready, because the house was quiet in the way that belongs to you, when you are finally the one who decides what quiet means. I had learned something I want to say plainly, for anyone listening who might need to hear it. Patience is not the same as permission. Staying quiet does not keep the peace. It teaches people that the peace is theirs to control. And love, real love, does not require you to shrink so that someone else can expand. It does not require your signature on something that costs you your voice. It does not require you to eat breakfast at 6:30 in the morning in your own kitchen, to avoid someone else's mood. I waited too long. I want to be honest about that. I waited because I was afraid. And fear is a perfectly human reason, but it is not a good enough one. The people who take advantage of your fear do not stop because you are patient. They stop when the ground shifts, and they discover it was never as solid as they believed. My ground shifted the morning Brenda looked at Gerald's streak on the ceiling and decided it was a problem to solve. What she did not understand, what people who confuse volume for ownership rarely understand, is that some things in a house belong to the person who earned them in ways that no deed needs to record. The streak on the ceiling is mine. The garden chair against the rose fence is mine. The early morning kitchen light at 6:50, an hour now instead of an escape, is mine. The rest followed. If you are listening to this, and something in it sounds familiar, if there is a room in your life that used to be yours and has quietly been claimed by someone else's certainty, I want you to know one thing with the same certainty I feel standing in my own living room tonight. You are allowed to take your name back. You are allowed to call the person who knows where to look. You are allowed to serve the paper and close the account and sit in your garden chair in the evening without explaining it to anyone. You are allowed to come home. Now I want to hear from you. What did you take from my story?